Deficits are skill acquisition deficits are also known as can't do because the individual does not know how to do the skill or behavior. If they are unable or they don't know how to do the skill or behavior, we need to work on teaching them so they are able to perform that skill. Performance deficits are also known as won't do or motivational deficits. The person is able to perform the skill or behavior, but they are not demonstrating it. In this case, we need to look at the factors affecting the lack of performance so they can be identified and addressed. That way, we can support the learner to perform the skill when they need to. In order for us to successfully support the individual, we need to know if they have a skill deficit, they can't do it, or a performance deficit, they won't do it. We need to understand and determine the difference between a skill and a performance deficit so that we are able to select an appropriate intervention strategy to use with the learner. We want to make sure we understand what type of issue the person is experiencing so that we can support them in either learning the skill, as would be the case with the skill deficit, versus they already have the skill but they aren't using it when it's appropriate, such as with a performance deficit. If someone can't do this skill, offering them all the rewards in the world won't help them perform. So, with skill deficits, we would choose interventions that teach the skill. If someone won't do the skill, using a teaching intervention would be a waste of time because they already know how to do the skill. In that case, we are looking at a performance or motivational deficits, and we need to choose interventions that require us to alter the environment, look at different reinforcement, or use higher rates of reinforcement. I would like to take a minute to stress an important point in regards to a learner being able to repeat verbal instructions that you give them. Just because they're able to repeat verbal instructions back doesn't necessarily mean they know how to perform the skill you're asking them to do. Being able to repeat what is said is not the same skill as being able to listen, comprehend, and follow the direction independently. So it's important to keep this in mind when thinking about can't versus won't do. For example, a learner may be able to repeat back or tell you how to do something, but they may not be able to keep that information in their working memory long enough to follow through and complete the task or skill. It may be difficult for us to determine if someone is experiencing a skill deficit versus a performance deficit. The following are 5 questions to ask that may help you figure it out. Let's discuss question 1. Does the learner perform the skill or behavior across multiple settings and people? You might need to ask and observe the learner in different settings or with different people to see if they are able to perform the behavior. If the answer to question 1 is no, then it can be likely that they can't do the skill and it is a skill deficit. For an example, the learner is able to perform a social skill or behavior with adults, but does not know how to perform the skill with peers or children their own age. It is a different skill or behavior depending on the person they're interacting with. So they can do it with an adult, but they don't understand how to do a social behavior with a peer or other children their age. In that case, it would be a skill deficit. Question 2 asks, does the learner perform the skill without support or assistance from other people? If yes, it's likely a motivational or performance deficit because they have demonstrated that they're able to perform the skill or behavior independently. If the answer to that question is no, then it's most likely a skill acquisition deficit that needs additional teaching, may require prompting and then prompt fading over time so that they are able to perform the skill independently. Question 3. Does the learner perform the skill fluently? First, let's define fluently. The definition of fluently is the fluid combination of accuracy plus speed that characterize competent performance. In plain terms, can they perform the skill quickly and easily? If the answer to question 3 is yes, and they are able to do the skill with ease, then it would most likely be a performance or motivational deficit they are experiencing. So, why is it important to think about fluency? Fluency problems in learners with autism and other disabilities can manifest in different ways, including motor responses that require a lot of effort on their part, long durations of responding, and long lags in responding, all of which can result in poor learning and social outcomes. The individual might need additional teaching and support since they may not have mastered the skill. Lack of fluency is most likely a skill deficit. For example, in a classroom setting, if a learner is asked a question by the teacher and fails to respond within an appropriate amount of time, they may be lacking the skill of how to answer questions within a certain amount of time and need additional training and support in mastering the skill and becoming fluent in it. Question 4. Does the learner perform the skill when reinforcement is provided? If the answer is yes, then it's probably a skill deficit. Providing reinforcement can be a motivational variable that can increase the frequency of the learner doing the skill or behavior. It's only considered reinforcement to the person if it is a consequence they earn after performing the skill and if it increases the future likelihood of them doing the skill again. If appropriate reinforcement is provided, that would be something that the learner values and is willing to do the behavior for to earn the reinforcement, but the learner still cannot perform the skill. That would be a skill deficit. For example, if you did not know how to speak another language, no amount of money offered to you would make you perform the skill. You simply cannot do the skill no matter how much reinforcement is offered to you. We've made it to our final question, question 5. Does the learner perform the skill when environmental modifications are made? If the answer to this question is yes, then it is likely they are experiencing a performance deficit. So let me give you some examples. We can modify the environment in different ways. One way is by setting goals and rewards for achieving the goal, changing the types, amounts, and frequency of reinforcement the learner can gain by performing the behavior. Other ways we can modify the environment is by changing the expectation of when the skill is to be performed. For example, if a learner struggles completing chores in the morning when they are still sleepy and irritable, can changing chore time to after lunch increase their ability to finish the chore? If they're able to demonstrate the skill after lunch, then you know it was a performance deficit. Here's some things to think about when you're trying to problem solve can't versus won't do. So, whenever a learner is not demonstrating the expected behavior or skill, you might want to start to think about, have you ever observed the learner do this skill before? You also might want to talk to other people and see if they have seen the learner do this skill before either. Think about where and when they are able to perform the skill, if they are, and think also about if there are things that could be changed about the environment or the reinforcement that would result in the learner doing the behavior or skill. I wanted to give you an example of problem solving. So let's say it's time for school and your learner is just not getting ready on their own. Start by thinking through other times your learner has had the opportunity to get ready for school. Is there anything different about this time than other times? Does the learner usually have help or a different kind of support? Has the learner done this skill independently before? If yes, when did they do it? Who were they with? And how often was it observed? What activity follows this skill? Is it enjoyable to the learner? Does the learner usually get something after performing this skill? You might want to test out a couple different strategies to see what may work. So, if you offer the learner a reward, are they able to do the skill? If you offer them additional help, can they do it? If you give the learner additional time, are they able to do the skill? Maybe if a different person helps or instructs, would they do that skill for them? Do what you need to do for this instance, but you might want to evaluate what works so you can problem solve for next time. So, if the learner needs additional help or more time, or if they've never demonstrated this skill, then most likely that would indicate that it's a skill deficit. If the learner was able to perform the skill when a reward was added or when a different person was involved, then that is most likely a performance deficit. Okay, let's say you determine it's a skill acquisition deficit and it needs to be addressed. Here are some strategies you can try with your learner. Teach the skill behavior directly. You may have to break down each step into smaller parts and teach each step to complete the skill. You can define the skill or behavior so the learner knows exactly what is expected. You can give examples. You can model the skill or behavior. They can watch you. You can do a video model where they watch someone else perform the skill on a video. You can practice or role play the skill. This might be fun and helpful for someone to practice in a low stakes environment before actually having to perform the skill. You can provide them feedback. Feedback is simply letting them know what they did well and what they still need to work on. Use reinforcement. That can be positive praise, it can be high fives, it can be edibles, it can be any other items or activities the learner really enjoys. Let's talk through a scenario of a skill deficit. So let's say that in the area of adaptive skills, you have a learner that is not able to make their bed because they've never demonstrated the skill. So you might want to test this out further to make sure it's actually a skill deficit. You can do this by providing really strong incentives if they can perform the desired behavior of making their bed. You offer them their favorite thing in the world, chocolate ice cream. They would do just about anything for chocolate ice cream. If you offer chocolate ice cream, once they are able to make their bed and the individual fails to perform under these conditions, then it's likely the problem is a skill deficit and not a performance deficit. Let's say you've determined that it's a skill deficit. Now, what do? We need to teach the skill by providing instructions, modeling, practice, giving feedback on the performance, and reinforcing the learner. We can start by instructions. You can start by operationally defining the skill of making a bed so everyone is on the same page about what that looks like. For example, an operational definition of making a bed could be to arrange the sheets, blankets, or other coverings of a bed smoothly and neatly, with the corners tucked under the mattress and a pillow at the head of the bed. When providing instructions, make them simple, clear, and short. You can pair them with visual aids such as written words or pictures, depending on what works best for your learner. And keep in mind that you may need to break down the bed making skill into smaller steps and teach each step to mastery until the learner can make the bed themselves. You can show them examples of what a properly made bed looks like, and then you can provide non-examples, such as messy blankets not tucked in and the pillow hanging off the bed. Next, you can use modeling. That simply means showing people how to make the bed. You can do this in real time, or you can use video modeling where the learner watches another person make the bed in a video. Modeling can help bring the instructions to life so the learner can visualize the steps. Then move on to practice. After watching modeling of the skill, it's time for the learner to practice the behavior. They may need multiple opportunities to practice in the natural environment. and that means they'll just be using their bed to practice. Before moving on to offering corrective feedback, make sure they have ample practice or rehearsal. Feedback. Offer feedback to the learner that is specific and in the moment. Make sure to really highlight areas that are their strengths and also areas they can improve on. Here's an example. Nice job tucking in the corners of the sheet. Let's work on putting the pillow on the bed. And don't overwhelm the learner with too many things they need to work on. Start by providing feedback on one or two areas to improve on, and don't forget to let them know what they're doing well, even if that's just they're trying their best. Reinforce. Think about what is reinforcing to the person. Everyone is an individual, and what works for one person might not be reinforcing for another. Now let's switch gears and address a performance deficit. Need to start by identifying the factors affecting the performance. Practice and reinforcing the skill or behavior in different settings, contexts with different peoples and different ages. You're going to need strong collaboration with the people supporting the learners in different settings, contexts, age groups. Modify the environment to promote performance of the skill or behavior, and don't forget to use reinforcement. Here's an example of a performance deficit. So our learner is able to wait and take turns speaking in a conversation, but instead they're interrupting their peers while they're talking. We can test to see if this individual can wait to speak by offering a reinforcer for taking turns. If the individual is able to wait to speak, then they would seem to have a performance or a motivational deficit in regards to waiting their turn to speak. So in our example, we determined that this was a performance deficit. So now what do? We're going to start by defining the target behavior so everyone's on the same page. So for example, the behavior of interrupting may be defined as speaking before your communication partner has completed their sentence. Next, we want to identify antecedents, and antecedents means what happens immediately before their behavior of interrupting, and identify the consequences, what happens immediately after their behavior of interrupting. For example, an antecedent would be their communication partner starts speaking about a topic that the individual is very interested in. The individual's behavior could be interrupting, and the consequence is the individual receiving attention after they were interrupting. Next, we want to develop and carry out a plan to alter those antecedents and consequences so that the desired behavior will occur. In this case, our desired behavior would be waiting for your communication partner to stop speaking before you start speaking. So, for example, the antecedent would be we could remind them about taking a turn, and then we could alter the consequence by praising them for allowing their speaking partner to finish before they start talking. Now it's time to wrap it up. Keep in mind, we need to determine if the learner has a skill or performance deficit so we can choose an appropriate way to address it. If they can't do it, then they need to be taught. If they won't do it, you may need to modify the antecedents and consequences in the environment. Make a plan to address the issue and collaborate with others supporting the learner so everyone's on the same page. Make sure you provide opportunities for practice, and don't forget to reinforce the behavior you'd like to see when it occurs. Here are the references for this presentation. Thank you.